Well, hello, everyone. I am Phillip Sipiora, professor of English and Film Studies at the University of South Florida. And today I'm pleased to have a conversation with film producer Joe Restaino. I have always understood film and taught film for several decades as the most dynamic art form, telling us so much about our human successes and failures, as well as our deepest desires and fears. Film, I firmly believe, ultimately teaches us mostly about ourselves as we interconnect cinematic fantasy with our own personal realities. So today we are privileged to talk to Joe Restaino, an accomplished film producer who has nearly 20 films to his credit, including such recent films as Pig, Fear of Rain, and Lady of the Manor. Mr. Restaino has been involved in professional filmmaking for well over a decade, and his film work finds him spending considerable time in Los Angeles, film locations, and Tampa, where he lives with his wife and two daughters. Welcome, Joe Restaino. I'd like to start at the beginning of your romance with movies. Were you a typical toddler nourished on Disney films? Did your parents support and encourage your early interest in film?
Well, first, Phil, thanks for having me today. It's good to be here and do this interview and talk about this film career, I guess, that all of a sudden blossomed about 10 years ago. Um, I wouldn't say Disney films. I don't. I mean, growing up in the 80s, a lot of what I watched. I mean, early on, I remember watching Burt Reynolds movies, Smokey and the Bandit. For some reason, I was watching what my father was watching. Norman Lear TV shows, like Sanford and Son and shows like that on TV. Of course, Star Wars was huge. So George Lucas movies were very popular. Uh, John Hughes movies. I feel like those really were my generation. Home Alone, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Weird Science, movies like that. Um, those are the ones that, they were story driven, great directors. A lot of them are still making films today. And then you also had superstar actors, Burt Reynolds. I mean, it was funny. I actually made one of his last movies recently. That came out called Apple of My Eye. Got to work with him um, later in life, which was great. But yeah, I mean, and my parents, I mean, they weren't, we weren't like a family that, talked about different movies. We would go to Blockbuster, if you remember Blockbuster, and get the new release on a Friday and go home and watch it. But it was, it was just popcorn type movies. Those were the types that I grew up watching.
Okay. How did you actually begin your professional film career? Was there a single incident or experience that triggered your love for working in cinema?
Yeah, I think living here in Tampa, I went to school at Florida State University, and then I came here and I was a part of a film festival called Gasparilla Film Festival, which is still going on now. And I have a lot of friends in the industry from college, and I would go out to Sundance, and the Sundance Film Festival, which is the epicenter for independent movies. It's where all, when you're watching like Napoleon Dynamite came out of there, Whiplash, which was up for Oscars a couple years ago. A lot of top films come out of festivals like Sundance. Moonlight was one that didn't premiere at Sundance, but it premiered at Telluride, which is another film festival. So I'd go to film festivals and with friends and have these experiences where you're meeting all these artists and then I just got sucked into a film. Ended up making that film in Tampa, and it snowballed from there, where I started really enjoying the time and energy I was being around these people. They're artists are very collaborative, and they're dreamers, and it kind of like coming from a finance background, that's what I have. I really enjoyed bringing the finance aspect to the artist and kind of working well. We worked well together. So I wouldn't say there was a single, but there was a snowball effect of a few things that led to where I'm at today.
Okay, I think now you are clearly best known as a producer, but your film experience transcends producing, and you have had some experience as an actor, and of course, as you mentioned, significant experience as a financial analyst. How important has this diverse background been to your success as a producer?
Well, it's funny. I wouldn't say I'm an actor by any means. That was more, if I ever acted, it was, I don't want to say it's a joke, but it's more of like a producer cameo type thing in a movie. I just did one actually. Got to, one of my films growing up that I watched was a movie called Cruel Intentions with Ryan Phillippe and Reese Witherspoon. So I got to work with Ryan recently on a movie, and there was a scene in it, and this will go back to your question about how does acting it kind of acting in a little role in a movie helps you understand what an actor goes through. It helps you understand what a day on set is like, and I never really enjoyed it. I've done it a couple times. It's because a lot of it is hurry up and wait. But in this case, I got to work on a film called Lady of the Manor that I produced. Ryan Phillippe was in the film, and I got to be one of his friends for a scene at a bar, which I was not looking forward to, but I kept telling myself I get to work with someone like an artist that I grew up watching his movie, as a younger, as a kid. So I was like, this is something that will last. A film is timeless. So I'll get to be in this film with him, and other actors, and it was just ended up being a good experience. But it's always like, as a producer, you gotta, you're always on the go. You're always doing something. As an actor, a lot of times you're waiting for that scene. And then when you get into the scene, it could be over in minutes, or it could take hours. It just depends on, the setups. So you really understand what set life is like being an actor. It's not for everybody, but I think you should you should at least be on set and experience what it's like. In finance, it's really, film is a business. A lot of people look at the art of it, and they see what's on in a movie, like a 2-hour movie, but there's a lot that goes into that could take months, even years lead up to get to the point where you can actually make a film, which sometimes takes a few weeks to production of a movie, could take a few months on a bigger production. And then it goes into a whole post-production world where the movie kind of gets, I would say, lost, but there's also, there's a few people involved to push that film to being seen. So as a financial person, you have to budget, so a budget goes into all of it. Without an appropriate budget, a film, won't get made properly, and it won't get released properly. And then, if you lose money in a movie, you won't be making movies long. So having a financial background on films really helps. Has helped. I think with the people I work with, it also like brings a different level of trust, because I've been doing finance right out of college. I've been in the financial world before I was in film world. So I started in finance management, investment management, since the day before 9/11. I've been doing it. So, and then I got into film about 10 years after that. So I really believe if I got into film first, I probably wouldn't be doing it still today, because I wouldn't understand, and it's a survival game in film. But it definitely has helped. Most of my peers in film do not have a financial background, so it does, enables me to bring something different, and then allow the artists to really do what they do best.
Okay, I think of a producer as a parent who has two children, and to extend the metaphor, finance and art or entertainment, whatever term you want to use, how much of a conflict are these in play for your attention, your resources, your energy, your planning, everything? Is it a state of constant conflict, turning on the financial spigot and then making a cinematic product? Or sometimes do they work together harmoniously in flow?
Sometimes they work together. It's a juggling act. Sometimes what you'll see all the time in film, you see like a director's cut, or what was, a lot of time, most times is what's released and what the audience sees, not necessarily is exactly the director's vision. And because a lot of times the financial part comes into play. Just recently, we have a film that is a thriller, and it was all set up to be an R-rated movie because it had a few extra, bad words, I guess you would say, in it. We ended up talking. Our distributor comes on, and they changed some of the language to bring it down to a PG-13, and not that affected the creative too much at all, but there was also some scenes that were a little more graphic that we made more mild, just because it would help when you go from an R-rated movie to a PG-13 movie. It just opens up your audience tremendously, and it allows way more people to see it. So it does. That's a scenario where the financial part does come into play. It's funny though. Growing up, we talked about movies, and Phil, they didn't have PG-13 when I was growing up, so it was PG. And Jaws, which is a PG film. And it's funny seeing that today. That movie would be R, or close to it anyway. Probably would be R. And it would not have seen the audience wouldn't have been as large probably as it was if it came out today. Or it might have been look different. There might have been less scenes that were so graphic in a movie like that. But it was the business is always changing, and we're especially nowadays with where we're at in the world with the pandemic and everything else. I mean, you're seeing a different landscape, continuous.
Is it fair to say that securing financing for independent filmmakers is always a challenge?
For independent filmmakers, yeah. I mean, it's a challenge always, but it's also like if you have a great product, you have a great content. Content drives it, and it's hard to get started and really, because you can raise money, but if you make a film and it does lousy, it's just not executed correctly, then those investors aren't gonna come back more than likely. So you want to make a product that people want to see, and that takes a while to understand how to do that. And once you understand how to do that, it makes it easier for investors to come aboard. I think I've lucked out where you learn from mentors in the film business along the way on how to do things, and I have a good team around me now that really we look at film as if we present it's an investment, it is, and if you present it in a way that you protect your investors' money, there's ways to do that, to protect money up front before you even start making film. So we've had a string of success that has enabled our investors to keep coming back, because now they're comfortable, they know what to expect, and we've kind of like brought them here's the worst case scenario, and the worst case scenario still doesn't look that bad. But yes, early on, I think it's challenging. I mean, it's funny, the movie Quentin Tarantino's latest movie, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. You think all these stars, Leonardo DiCaprio, Brad Tarantino, that movie came across my desk as needing an investment. So no matter the movie, they always need more. And ask any director, and that's why you don't want to tell a director the budget necessarily, because they always want more.
Okay. Perhaps if we can move beyond the nuts and bolts of the business, which film is your all-time favorite and why?
Huh. That's a good question. For different reasons. I mean, I always answer. I mean, I've answered this several times, and the one that always comes to my head as being significant, in my just the resilience and the courage and the movie and the way the movie was made and was Rocky. Rocky is a film that Sylvester Stallone was not a name, and he wanted to get this film made, and he wanted to be the star, and no one would give him that opportunity to be Rocky. Like, people wanted to make it, but they didn't want him to be the star because no one knew who he was. It ends up making it and wins all these awards, and that movie it's a great film, and it's transcend time, and they've made more and more, and they just made others with off different storylines, and that film is beautiful to me. It's funny, and I grew up in the Northeast too, and I not from Philadelphia, of course, but it was I guess I love those movies like that encompass a region or an area, or it's Philadelphia. Like there's a movie called Bronx Tale. I love that movie. Chaz Palminteri's movie, who I brought him down to Tampa for a film festival. A movie called Guide to Recognizing Your Saints by Dito Montel that won Sundance several years ago is another one that's about a neighborhood in Queens. And those kind of movies that I just watched Annie Hall recently, Woody Allen movie. Those movies are the ones that you feel like you're part of a neighborhood. You understand the characters and the world that they're in. They do a great job building that up. It's funny now. I think Rocky came out in 1977. I want to say I was born in '79. I just did a movie recently where the editor of Rocky was Richard Halsey, who won an Oscar. I got his daughter, Morgan, just finished editing a film of ours called Fear of Rain. I was at his house, and I got to hold the Oscar that he won from Rocky. You're talking, what is that, 43 years later or so, 42 years later, I'm holding it, and it was pretty amazing to experience that. Now his daughter, who's an accomplished editor, just edited our film. So it's I would say Rocky.
Okay, the films that you mentioned all resonate significantly with me. In particular, I love neighborhood films. I'm working on a project on Scorsese's Mean Streets now, which to me is a quintessential neighborhood film, and there are so many others like the ones that you mentioned. Perhaps we might turn to your body of work. Which is your favorite film that you have produced?
It's I think now I have movies. I just had a movie released that I like a lot. I just had it released right around 4th of July, and right now releasing the movie's taboo kind of, and we had the #1 movie at the limited box office that we did a bunch of drive-ins with a movie called Skyman. And I don't know if I would say it's my favorite movie, but I liked it because it was a small independent film called Skyman. The director-writer was Dan Myrick, who did Blair Witch Project. So we did this film, gritty. It was a small crew, about 15 crew members. And this is a film that like students could make, but we did it we executed it at a higher level. And I think students can do it as well. It's a case of a really good story about a man who, as a child at 10 years old, he had an experience with an alien, a UFO. He knows now, fast forward 30 years later, at his 40th birthday, he's going to experience he's going to have an re-experience with the alien again. So he brings his sister and his best friend out to the desert in Apple Valley, and you're along for this journey. And it really, yes, it's a UFO film, it's an alien film. We did it on a tiny budget, but it's more, it's things. It's something that happened to him at age 10, and it stayed with him his whole life, and it made him who the person he was today. And so like all of us are affected by things from our childhood. Maybe not UFOs, but there's something that affected you, and then this film taught you that, and you go along the ride with this character named Carl, and you really understand that things stay with people, and if you believe in something, you really, what's great about the character Carl, he sees it through, and you can't convince him otherwise. The reviews on this little movie we made have been outstanding. I mean, the New York Times gave it positive reviews. IndieWire, which is the most credible source for independent filmmaking and review. Well, New York Times is high level. Like, you can't beat that. But IndieWire gets down to just independent films, and they gave it a positive review. We've been doing really well with that movie during this pandemic time. And I'm proud of it, and I'm proud of all the small crew we had. We had all unknown actors. It was just fun, and it was away from the studio system. But I do have coming up, and they would be coming out now, if we weren't in this situation. I have a few larger films that I'm super proud of. I think one you mentioned, Pig, is one that stars Nicolas Cage. And that one should be coming out next year. It was just purchased by Neon. Neon is the company who released Parasite, which won all the Academy Awards. I think it was last year. So they bought that one, and they are going to release it next year. And it's one that it was featured on. If you watch John Oliver is on HBO. He does a show called Last Week Tonight, I think it is, and he featured Pig in his opening because it's about a man who's living out in the woods outside of Portland, and he's a truffle hunter, and he has this pig that he uses to hunt for the best truffles. One night, someone breaks into his little shack and steals his pig, and the movie is Nick Cage going to get his pig back. So he's pretty pissed off, and it's gotten some great attention, and it's one that I think we're really proud of. But I think everyone, no matter how good or bad it is, I mean, you're proud of everyone, because you got to think a film has anywhere from usually 50 to 150 people involved, working for all different crazy hours, putting everything into it. Some of them, you make careers out of it. Some of these movies turn into careers for people. Several students from USF have worked on our films and have stayed in the film business. I did a film with the same director, different films with the same director. I just did a third movie called Fear of Rain, which we're beyond proud of. It stars Katherine Heigl and Harry Connick Jr. and several others, coming out next year. That one, that director, who's young, and I did her first film, I think she was 23 or 4, and then when she was 25, and then now I think she's 27, and she just booked a 2-picture deal on studio films because of and I've done all 3 of her movies. So, you're proud of that when you see a young artist, especially nowadays, female artists, kind of you help their career, and it really means a lot.
Okay, I think that's very important information, and I'm so happy that so many USF students have been able to contribute thanks to you over time. Let me turn to a teacher's question. Having taught film for decades, I continually face a common challenge. How do we teachers make older films relevant to today's students? And I'm particularly interested in your thoughts because obviously demographics are a critical criterion in your production work, your marketing work, etc. So I'm wondering if you could address that issue of relevance and share any thoughts you may have.
You know, for me, it's not hard because I love film, right? I understand, like I'm excited to watch older, like I said, I watched Annie Hall and Woody Allen's movie recently. I just watched Doctor Strangelove, Stanley Kubrick's film last week. You know, it's challenging, but you know, I think it's challenging for students, you know, probably to relate to those films, because maybe you pick them up later in life. I mean, I didn't watch them necessarily when I was in high school and college, but then I think you start appreciating films more, you know, for the art they are. And then those films were art films. I mean, they're, you know, like I said, I just watched Doctor Strangelove, and it's like, you know, I don't, it's a film for the time, but it's also transcended time. And it's, you know, I think you have to, you know, help the students understand and relate to those movies, how they were important for that time period. You know, like we just had Moonlight come out a couple years ago, and I don't know how that would have done 20 years ago, 30 years ago, but for the time period that we're in, you know, it's, you know, and how is it going to look in 20, 30 years from now? You know, so I think we have to continually help people understand the time period that these movies do come out. If you just watch Doctor Strangelove and you don't understand what's going on in the world at that time, maybe it would be harder to relate to it. You know, and I think, you know, you just got to continually evolve. I mean, film's evolving. You know, you just keep educating. History is important, and I think that goes along with the films that we're seeing. I mean, but I agree, it is a challenge. You got to be selective. You know, I've been your classes several times, and I know that you're programming great stuff. I mean, newer stuff and newer films and older films, and I've only heard good things about the films you show. So maybe like, and a lot of times these directors that are doing them, I mean, they're, you know, Ron Howard's still doing movies. He's been doing them forever. You know, there's a lot of Spielberg, you know, sprinkle in movies from those kind of directors that are still doing movies today to show their early works. I definitely think you need Rocky on your list. I think that would transcend time. And I think to it. Yeah.
And I would also add Clint Eastwood's name to that list. Even though he's only 90, I understand that he has a 10-year plan of filmmaking ahead.
I heard he's got a comeback coming, he said. Yeah.
Although
he's doing great.
Yeah, I think so too. Although I'm not sure he ever stepped down. I was thinking this morning about our interview, and you and I have known each other for a long time, going back to the Italian Club of Tampa where we first met. And you have been exceptionally gracious to visit my large film class approximately 10 times over many years, sometimes bringing with you a range of film professionals, actors, acting coaches, promotion individuals, a range of people. And you always are gracious in presenting live to the students and taking significant questions from them. So I'm guessing that you draw energy, enthusiasm, and inspiration from students, particularly when you enter into the give and take of Q&A. So how do you feel about speaking to college students about film in general and about your projects in particular?
I love giving back. I mean, I live here in Tampa, and it's not known as a film, you know, a film city, I guess you would say. There's so being one of the few in this area that has stepped out of our Tampa Bay area and made films elsewhere, or also bringing films here. I feel like it's my duty to educate. That's why I was the head of also the Gasparilla Film Festivals for several years. You know, it's being able to educate the community. You've been gracious to allow me to come to your class, and it's really been beneficial for me as well. Several students have been my interns or worked for me, and then now they've gone off to doing bigger, better things as well. It makes it rewarding, to be able to do that. And I get from them when I'm doing those Q&As, I kind of like hear things that the students generally have been very curious with different questions, and that really helps me understand um, a lot. I always ask, for them to send me ideas. I think most of the good ideas, as you know, I mean, they come from younger generations, so it helps me as well with content and ideas for future movies, or what students are watching is very important. That is like actually the best in filmmaking. The demographic of college students is pretty much the highest audience, the that you want to watch your film. So it's very important to I think last time I was there, I showed Fear of Rain, a trailer for it, and that's the one we have coming out with Katherine Heigl and Harry Connick, and it has two younger stars in it. And the students were like erupted over the trailer, which was really gave us confidence. And they knew the younger actors in it, so it was good, and I think that really helps. What we do is kind of like a tape. And I know what we should do is sometime I should bring a movie there when we can get back to real life, and it's one that we haven't released yet, to get your students' perspective on that movie, kind of like a before it's released, to give us an idea of the thoughts on the movie would be
Well, I'm
good.
all for that, and my students are very interested in not just seeing historical cinema or even contemporary cinema, but having some hands-on knowledge and familiarity with the mechanics of filmmaking. And obviously, you're the direct link there. Let me ask
Mhm.
you about those architectural terms, which I think defies uh, definition, at least in the present day. And that would be culture, which
Mhm.
clearly is a dominant force in film studies always, but especially today. And if we just look at what's happened with Gone with the Wind over the
Uh,
past month or so, uh, 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 individuals are reassessing uh, cultural representations in cinema over time, and continually arriving at generational visions and versions of what they see. And of course, all of these issues are acutely significant in the classroom. So my
uh,
question is, do you feel that contemporary cinema, the kind of movies that you make, contemporary cinema is effective in depicting a sufficient range of cultures, subcultures, and cultural relationships, considering the powerful and sometimes dangerous matrix of cultural nuances and implications of today's times?
yeah, no, I do, and it's definitely prevalent. You for filmmakers, I mean, it's different times. I mean, you have to be careful in representation on camera. It's Holly Berry was gonna. I think I just saw she pulled out of a movie where she was playing a transgender. I think there's gonna be a line that has to be drawn. I mean, actors are acting, and I don't know the right answer at all on this. We have I think having diversity in your movie is always been important to us. I mean, I've worked with several female directors, and my producing partner is a female, and I think there's stories that are going to come out of this that need to come out, and maybe it's going to be positive, where more stories are told, from just more diverse group of artists, as opposed to just put in A-list star in every role, and that's all that's out there. And I think the channels that are out now, the distribution channels that are available now from Hulu and Netflix and Amazon and all the other ones, Vudu. There's so many different ways to get your movie out. It's going to really that helps bring in diversity to movies. Well, it gets those stories out, because for the longest, it's hard enough to make a movie. Now, if you're making a movie, there's like we talked about financial parts of it. If you're making a movie with actors, and most, diverse actors, they're not known a lot of times, so they don't have value to studios. And this is where the studios were just putting out Marvel movies forever, or whatever, those kind of movies that they know are profitable. So it kind of limited our range of what's in theaters. But then luckily we had the streamers come aboard, Netflix and Amazon, like I said, and they've opened the doors to more diverse voices, because it doesn't cost as much money to go right to a Netflix or an Amazon, and they are targeting audiences a lot more particularly. So it is changing. Cinema is changing. Filmmakers need to, writers need to, and it starts with the script. I mean, the writers need to really make films or make stories that are not just white stories or Asian stories or black stories. It needs to be diverse and really, encompass all cultures. And it's important. I mean, I remember as a kid, I used to watch a lot Boys in the Hood, and there wasn't many films like that. Now there's a lot more. So it's good. It's a good thing, change. And I think it will help. Cinema's always been a huge part of culture and a huge part of, just life in general. And it's where a lot of people get what they believe is reality of the world. So it should depict what is the real, reality of the world, not just be the bunch of the same types of people in a movie. It should be diverse. It's important. So, we're all for change, and I think it's allow new voices to come forward.
Well, your thoughts very much express mine, and the topic and topics are changing so rapidly. It's sometimes difficult to keep up. In the remaining time that we have, I'd like to turn to a couple of areas. One area that really interests me as the film professor is the issue of international cinema and file sharing technology, and how these phenomena have changed film. And what I mean by this is I have some students who watch a movie a day, some even more than that, and they can watch just about anything anywhere in the world. And I understand that, using shareware technology, et cetera. And now we have films made in remote locations, sometimes with cell phone cameras, et cetera. That part of the industry is surely changing. What I'm interested in hearing from you in terms of your thoughts is, how have these factors, these contexts, these availabilities changed the cinematic world?
Yeah, it's enabled people you can watch a movie anywhere. I mean, you can just use Siri and say, I want to see whatever movie you want anywhere you are nowadays. So it's really, or any types of movies, it's opened the doors globally to watch movies anywhere. International cinema is way more prevalent over here now, and our movies are getting seen abroad a lot more. I mean, when we release a movie, over half of the income comes from foreign markets. So we are, it's ever changing, but it's getting better. I mean, it's getting better to get your film out into the whole world. We've also, like, certain films don't, for comedies, for instance, maybe, and this is something that if you're not in the business, maybe you understand this if you hear it, but you don't really think about it. Comedy over in the US doesn't translate well in foreign countries. So you have to, and when you're setting up a film, you have to take that into account, that a lot of, like, a comedy normally in the US comedy is going to be seen here more, and people are going to understand it more. But like in China or, Germany or somewhere, they might not understand the comedy because our comedy is different, and vice versa. So, I mean, there's some genres of movies, like horror translates well everywhere in the world. If you're scared, you're scared. And those types of movies do well everywhere, if it's good, obviously. But I think the file sharing technology that you mentioned has enabled people to just watch films. You don't have to wait for that new movie at Blockbuster on Friday night anymore. You can literally just watch it on your smartphone, your laptop, wherever, and you could be anywhere, which is incredible. And that's why there's so much more. Well, except for the last few months, there's so much more new content that people need. They need distributors, cable TV, movie theaters, streaming platforms. They need content. We're going to be in a little trouble because we've had no film production pretty much for the last 4 months and probably several months forward. So next year, there might be a shortage of new content where Phil, we can start re-releasing those old classics to everyone, and they're gonna want to watch them because there won't be much new content. Yep.
Okay, well, you raised some good points, and who knows what the future will hold. But until we get to Elon Musk's Neuralink project, in which we're all hardwired with chips in our head, and we only have to think about requesting a film, and it's wired directly into our brains. I don't know what could be beyond that, but he's trying to raise $5 billion, and I understand that project is pretty far along. I guess we'll just have to wait and see, both of us. My next question, Joe, could only come from a longtime film professor, so I hope you'll bear with me on it. In the first half of the last century, films were often identified by the leading actors in them. Movies were commonly known then as an actor's medium. Actors defined the medium. However, roughly, and you know all this, of course, but roughly in the second half of the 20th century, films were commonly associated with and understood as a director's medium, or as film critics and scholars like to call it, auteur theory. However, my students today, who range from 18 to 21 or 22, my students today now often associate films once again with actors whom they admire. I'm very interested in your thoughts on this shifting cinematic center of gravity, actor and or director, some combination between the two, in terms of general public reception.
Yeah, and it depends. It's like actors lead movies, also directors. I mean, you have Richard Linklater. You know what you're gonna get from Richard Linklater film. But yes, he had Ethan Hawke in Boyhood, but not necessarily you're watching it because Ethan Hawke is in Boyhood. It's what types of films that those directors make. Spielberg, you're gonna watch his film no matter who's in it. Ron Howard. But lead-in actors, those types globally, we talked about half the revenue at least comes from foreign markets. A lot of times that's because if you have Tom Cruise in that big blockbuster, or Zac Efron or whoever, The Rock, those types of movies are blockbuster type movies. But it has changed. I mean, I did that movie with Burt Reynolds. I mentioned, and when not many people know this, but from the late 70s to the early 80s, he was a #1 box office actor in the world for like 4 or 5 years in a row. He was the Will Smith of that time, or the Tom Cruise of that time, and he was a lead-in man. There wasn't as many, I guess, as that you knew would be that bankable lead-in man, and then it was more, like you mentioned, director driven. I think we all have our favorite actors, people we like to see on camera. And if they're doing a movie, you're going to see it. You want to see that their movie or TV show. Now, TV, which is different. A lot of our favorite shows don't have very well-known actors in them. Story driven really helps. So there's a combination of both. I think director if it's a director that you like watching his movies, Quentin Tarantino, yes, uses huge stars in his movies most of the time, but it's a Quentin Tarantino movie, and if you like those types, you're gonna watch those movies. And it's ever changing. People watch movies with stars. It's Hollywood, and I think it's good. But again, going back to the culture and diversifying what types of movies are out there, all this is going to open up doors for new stars. New the Gal Gadettes of the world. People that are coming up that are new stars and really going to open doors. For you look at Mahershala Ali, who won an Oscar for Moonlight. People did not watch Moonlight for the stars in it, and they watched it because the story and the word got out, and that was they became stars from that movie. People, they were already amazing actors before that movie. They didn't need that movie to be amazing actors, but they needed that platform and they needed that push from the distributor to really believe in it. And it was the right movie at the right time.
Okay, I'm thinking back to your mention of Barry Jenkins' Moonlight, and I vividly recall a conversation that you and I had in which you predicted that Moonlight would be a big winner at the Academy Awards ceremony, and I was very impressed by your powerful assessment of this groundbreaking film, which I didn't know anything about. And as you correctly noted, it won Best Picture, Best Actor in a Supporting Role, and Best Writing Adapted Screenplay. What did you see early on when Moonlight was in the production stage that made you so effusive and optimistic about the success of the film?
Yeah, again, being around the industry at that time, but so I know Moonlight before when it was a teleplay called Black Boys Look Blue in the Moonlight. I think it was called. My friend Terrell McCraney wrote the teleplay. He's an accomplished playwright, now also writer for movies and TV shows. His show he's executive produces David Makes Man, which now is on HBO Max, and I think it's up for all these Emmys, and he's doing amazing. But he wrote the teleplay for Moonlight years ago, and I've known him at least 10 years, maybe longer now. So I read that, and Barry optioned the teleplay to make it into a film, and we were both at a conference a couple years prior to it being made. And it was a very hard movie to get financed. That movie almost didn't get financed until Brad Pitt's company, Plan B, came in, who Barry met at Telluride Film Festival, because Brad was on a festival circuit with 12 Years a Slave. Brad was at the festival with his team. Barry met the team and they talked about Moonlight, got some financing. They got A24 involved. And when you had those two partners, Plan B just coming off 12 Years a Slave and all the success that had, and then A24, which was a distributor that was on the uprise and it really believed in the movie, the script that Barry and Terrell put together was amazing. I had friends that worked on it because it was made in South Florida. I was so happy for all them and all the success, and you just, you knew at that moment, it was the Oscar so white moment, the movement the year before, and that there was a movie at Sundance that year, Birth of a Nation, that came out earlier in the year that was supposed to be the hot film, but then there was some things that happened to the director that kind of pushed it to the side, and Moonlight filled it amazingly. And I actually went to I got to see it before any audience saw it. We did a cast and crew and friends screening down in Miami, which was like a month before it was released at Telluride, and it was just phenomenal. I remember leaving and just saying the movie's flawless. It was flawlessly made, great cinematography. The story was just beautiful, and it was right at that time. So a right story for that time. And you know, I think here in Florida we should all be very proud because like all of them, the cinematographer, the director, a lot of the actors, they're all from Florida. The writer, Terrell McCraney. So it's a Florida story. And you know, it's one of those stories that hadn't been told for so long. It just got the right partners involved, and you kind of just know when you know that it got the attention that it deserved.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing your sensibility of the film, and I very much agree, having showed it many times in my course, and it's one of my favorite films too. One of the most popular movies in my current film and culture course. In fact, we showed this movie just yesterday. It was on our schedule, and that is Wonder Woman. Do you see this film, which I think is so brilliantly developed by director Patty Jenkins, and of course, Wonder Woman herself, Gal Gadot, as indicative of a new tide of action films? If yes, why and how so?
Yeah. Female-driven action films. Yeah, I agree. I think that there will be more. I have gotten scripts sent to me I have one right now in development that is a female-driven action film. You know, the lead is a female. You know, I don't know if it's a new thing. You know, one of my favorite films growing up was James Cameron's film, The Terminator. You know, with Linda Hamilton. You know, Sarah Connor. I feel like that was one of the first, or she was one of the first, and that was one of the first films to really put a female, you know, as a star in an action film. And yes, Arnold Schwarzenegger was in it, but at the time, Linda Hamilton was more known in that world as a serious actress. And you know, Sarah Connor, I mean, they kept making Terminators, and she was powerful and strong, and yes, there should have been more movies like that after. The industry didn't catch up at the time, and now, you know, I think it has. You're gonna see a lot more. I mean, the good thing with the Marvel movies, you know, they're great popcorn type movies, but there's a lot of action, you know, action stars in those movies that are female. So I think, yeah, I think we're gonna see a lot more of it. You know, it worked. I mean, Wonder Woman was, I can't remember the exact revenue box office it did, but I think it was ended up being top few of that year at the box office. So it's proven that it works, and they're coming out with another one. It was definitely, you know, definitely well executed. Patty did a great job. Gal did a great job. Her relationship with Chris Pine in the film was phenomenal. So I think, yeah, I agree. I think those films or, you know, I think female-driven action films, there should be more, and I think there will be more.
I appreciate those comments. And in my course, as you know, since we always have more than 200 students, it's critically important to select a schedule of films that have popularity. If a film is not appreciated by at least 2/3 of the students, then I simply don't show it again.
Yeah, that's good.
We have to take care of business, and that's our business, helping and educating students. So I have saved my two best questions for last. First, please look into your crystal ball and tell us your thoughts about the future of film.
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked a lot about it, and it's right now. I mean, I do think people are beyond itching to get back to work. I mean, there's so many stories and scripts, and people are trying to put things together. It is challenging, you know, especially in the U.S. I think a lot of films you're going to see being made overseas. I think in Canada and overseas, I think you're going to see a lot more international stories. You're going to see more cultural diverse stories. I think like we talked about, female driven stories. I think all those will come out and be made a lot more of those. And we have the platforms, like we talked about, with Netflix and Hulu and Amazon and all those other platforms, to get these stories out. I do see, it's going to be trouble in the early part of next year, probably, with the lack of new content, which, is going to open up doors. I mean, I think people are going to have to be creative to get films made nowadays. We're looking at all different options. We had a couple films that we were supposed to start soon that we had to push. One was in Brooklyn, and another one was in the Hell's Kitchen area, that we're looking to move to Toronto and make Toronto look like New York. Or there's another one right now that it was supposed to be set in the South, and they're moving to Bulgaria. So I think film productions are getting more creative, and because it's going to be very challenging with COVID, to be comfortable going on a set with up to 100 or even more people and being close to them and making films. If you have an actress that's older, say, and there's someone on set that gets the virus, it's going to be very unlikely that actress will want to stay on set. So, it's just the world we're in, and hopefully we can get through it quick. Now, in the future, after everything becomes positive again, and we can move forward, I think, like we talked about the stories, I think the stories are only going to get better. They're going to be more diverse. I think it's going to be you're going to see a lot more diverse actors on camera, and stories will be not just A-list star driven. I think they're going to be script driven and director driven and diverse cast driven, which is great. I think that's where it needs to go. With your big Marvel movies splashed in as well. We need those blockbusters.
Those perspectives are very important, and we don't have time today to talk about it, but I'm very interested in the various roles that artificial intelligence and robotics will play. In my class, we show two films that have been made by AI, and of course, they're at the preliminary geometric form of, near cubist representation. And I don't want to get sidetracked on that. But as I think about robotics becoming so advanced, in which we can watch a character and have no idea if it's a human, a robot, or a cyborg, what the controlling intelligence is. And I expect the film industry, just as a teacher prognosticator, I anticipate that this area will even develop more quickly than it has. But anyway, that'll be a conversation for another day. My last question, Joe, and you've touched upon some of this, but I hope it's not a daunting question, but I'm interested in what the future holds for you personally. In particular, what projects, whether in place or theoretical, are high on your list? What do you see yourself doing, say, over the next 10 years as you look at the evolving nature of your career? What would you like to happen?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And this last 4 or 5 months or so has really enabled me to think about it, because it kind of like slowed us down. I go back and forth on it. I mean, it's I've only done film so far. I haven't gotten into the TV world yet. We do have a couple projects in a TV world that we're developing, and I'm with William Morris Endeavor Agency, which is the best talent agency, and they're the ones who make a lot of the movies that we watch and a lot of TV shows. They're the ones who get behind them, so they represent me and on all these projects. So I'm doing I got some what's it called, a docu series that we're doing, trying to work with like a major platform like HBO or someone on it, so doing some TV serial work would be fun, and it also like enables you to tell more of a story than what you can get in an hour and a half or 2 hour movie. It actually enables you to get a whole world, which, as you know, like so many shows on Netflix and all the Hulu and everything else, it's a lot of content like Serial that gets people watching for seasons and things like that, and maybe get into that world. A project that I'm excited about that we have set up is one called Fleeing, with a great friend of mine named Andre Holland, who was in Moonlight, matter of fact. It's a first time African American female director, and the cast is predominantly African American, and it's just a regular story. So it's just a great Brooklyn story, and getting stories out like that are character driven, but also like diverse character driven is very important to me. Just and working with people that I enjoy working with. I guess after doing it now 10 or so years, you kind of like know who you want to work with in the business, and just keep telling those stories. If I'm always looking for new content, new stories, and really just keep moving it forward. I think a lot's gonna come out. I have like 4 films coming out over the next, hopefully, 6 to 9 months, and I think a lot will dictate on those, on their success. So it's just keep telling powerful stories and looking for more, stories that need to be told. So.
Well, thank you, Joe, so much for a very insightful interview, and I look forward to sharing it with my students very soon. Again, your time and energy are much appreciated.
All right. Thank you, Phil. I really appreciate it. It was great to be here, and thanks for listening.
Okay. Thank you, and we'll talk soon. Take care.
All right, take care, man.